Good to be together. For those of you who are guests with us, both in the room and online, thanks a lot for being here. I've been amazed during such a crazy season of time at the number of just new people to Journey that I've been able to meet and interact with in some capacity, and so we're really glad that you're here. And would love to have you text hello. And so again, from either in the room or online, doesn't really matter, but we'd love to have you text hello. It's just our chance not to overwhelm you and not to spam you and all those kind of things, but just to say thanks for engaging, and really it's an honor just to get a chance to be together, and hope you're kind of encouraged by the day and the time we get to spend together. Miranda earlier read from the Psalm of the day, Psalm 57, and this just walk we've been taking through at least a chunk of the Psalms from the middle of the Bible this summer. It's allowed us to just stay together while we've been spread out a little bit. But we've just kind of been traveling through various Psalms when we gather on Sunday morning. And I want to jump back into that today, but before, just kind of to get us there, I want to show you a picture. I want to show you a picture. And this picture, it's not a flashy picture, as you can tell, right? But that is a picture of the house that my grandparents lived in all my growing up years in Battle Creek. They bought it when my mom and my uncle were kids, and then lived in it until I was in my 20s, well, actually in my 30s. And that house I spent a lot of time there. It was fairly close to where I lived with my mom, and then it was fairly close where I lived with my mom and my stepdad. And even before I can remember, my mom and I actually lived there for a really short window of time. And I just have so many memories of that house. And when I was a kid, and I would go to that house, you kind of know how it is, right? It's a really small house, but it felt like a castle. You know, when you go places and you're a kid, it just feels overwhelmingly big. But all the rooms are like remarkably small. I used to feel like the hallway was as big as a football field, like you could just run and run and run. It's like 2 adult steps, maybe. You know, like on a good day when you're feeling stretched out. You know what I mean? It's very small in the backyard, small in the basement, small, right? And my grandparents lived there. My grandma eventually passed away, and then my grandpa, whose health was declining quite a bit, my mom and my uncle kind of helped him move into more of like an assisted living home where he could get more around-the-clock care. And so they were selling this house. And I happened to be rolling back through Battle Creek one day, and I stopped by my mom's. Again, she lived fairly close by, a couple miles away. And I said, hey, is everything done on the sale yet, or do you still have keys to the house? Like, can I go through the house one more time? And she said, oh, yeah, sure. Everything's not done yet. Everything's empty. There's nothing in there. But here, kind of go through it. And so she gave me the keys, and I drove over there, and I drove up that really short driveway to that really small house that used to feel really long and like a castle. And I went in the back door because that's the only door we ever went in. Like I went in and kind of unlocked the back door, and I walk in. It was empty, and I just wandered through and kind of went down memory lane. And I'm honest enough to tell you, I literally wept in every room. I don't know how long. I was in there a long time. I wept in the kitchen and the little eating area, in the living room, all 3 bedrooms, the hallway, the bathroom, the basement, and the nooks and crannies of the basement, in the backyard. I just had so many memories in that house. I remember being in that front yard, and the tree that's kind of on the left side of that picture, when it was first planted, you know, sometimes you put the wire or the cable on the tree to help the tree stand up. I had a nice meeting with that wire when I was about 6 years old. I got the slice across, you know. I was running like this and turned around, and there was that wire. Yeah, I fell down the basement stairs when I was also probably about 6. That must have been a traumatic year, I guess. And my uncle, who happened to be downstairs, came around the corner, and I still remember him catching me as I went down off the last couple of steps. That house is where I met my first hero. My grandpa, who I called Pa, was my first hero. I didn't know this at the time, but he stepped in and was like this enormous father figure to me when my dad wasn't around. And I didn't have a vocabulary and understanding of that. I just knew he was bigger than life. He could do no wrong. There was nothing beyond him. He could move a mountain in my mind. And I remembered all the things we had done in that house and all the experiences we'd had. And I also remember thinking, you know, like some of my best memories in there, you know, my earliest memories are, you know, probably around age 4 or whatever. And I thought, man, those were good times. Those were good times. But I don't really want to go back. I don't want to go back. Because what I know now is that while it was really good for me, there was tons of brokenness around me. My parents had been divorced, and my dad had made some bad decisions, and things were fractured, and my mom was trying to single parent and navigate things. And it was great. It was great for me when I was 4 because I only knew kind of what was happening in any given room in a moment, right? And I'm fairly I'm not nostalgic except around family. And so there's this little thing of, would I go back to 4? Would I go back to 4? And I've thought about it a lot, and I thought, the only two things I might consider going back to is maybe I would consider going back to when I was 4, and maybe I would consider going back to when my girls were 4. Maybe, okay? Especially now that they're almost 16. It's more appealing every day. But I don't think I would, right? I mean, I'm definitely not going back to middle school. Anybody with me? I'm not going back to middle school, friends. I mean, right? And if you're in middle school, listen to me, if you're in middle school, you're going to make it. And you're going to be better for it. You're incredible, right? I'm not going back to high school. Some of you want to go back to high school. I get it. I'm not going back to high school. I have some of my most anchored friendships were formed in a couple years of college. I'm not going back to college. I'm just not doing it. Like I don't want to do it, right? There's just not many seasons of life I think I want to go back to, including even being 4 and going to my grandparents' house and all that went with that. And yet, here's what I find really interesting about myself and about what feels like very common conversation right now in the world in which we live. Is that I don't want to go back, and you don't want to go back to middle school, but there's probably some other seasons of life you don't want to go back to as well. Like, right? We don't really want to go back. And yet, do you know how fast it is right now that our conversations, mine included, like even conversations that some of us will have, how quickly we talk about, we just wish things would go back. Wish things could go back to normal. I wish things could go back, right? Like I wish things could go back to pre-COVID, whatever that means. I just want things to go back, right? But what's intriguing to me is and I know, like I've noticed this about my own life. Like I keep saying, I wish things could go back, and then I remember, 6 months ago there were some things I complained about a lot. So do I really want to go all the way? Like, do I really want to go back to normal? Like, really, there are certain things I want to go back. There are certain things I want to go back. Okay, like my wife, girls, Erica and the girls, they love to go to the movies. I would love for all of our sanity for them to be able to go to a movie. Okay, right? Like that needs to happen. I want some things to go back, right? But I wonder, do we really want to go back? Do we really want to go back to whatever normal was? Here's why it's a growing concern for my life and maybe our life collectively. God is a God who can't let anything be wasted. God's redemptive in his very nature. His heartbeat is redemptive. His heartbeat is to bring good out of bad. His heartbeat is to take what the enemy means for evil and use it for good. His heartbeat is to redeem and bring victory out of defeat. So I find myself saying, if we only want to go back, what will we have missed? What if there's something greater than back? What if there's something greater than just going back? And if we could tap into that greater, we might get to go back to some things, but we'll also grab a hold of some other things. We'll grab a hold of some of what God does with redemptive beauty right in the middle of this crisis. What if there's something greater than just back? Like, what if there's something greater that can bring some of the good out of back and introduce us to all new good going forward? What if there's something greater that the redemptive work of God would do in us while we're in the middle of all of this? What if all of this, like wading through junk and all of the confusion and the uncertainty, right? What if it doesn't have to be wasted? And what if it doesn't just have to be escaped? What if there's greater than back? What if there's greater than back? Again, God's got kind of this redemptive nature about him, right? He can bring good out of really bad things. That's just what he does. He won't let it be wasted. And I want to just look at a psalm today. It's going to be Psalm 84. Somewhere I had a Bible and I don't have it. So, but Psalm 84, is this passage where really we get a window in that okay, maybe there is something greater. And it's a psalm like lots of other psalms, right? It's written out of somebody's personal experience. It's written out of the experience of story. Look at my bride just rescuing the day. Thank you so much for that. It's her birthday. Tell her happy birthday while she's rescuing the day. So, yep, happy birthday. Yep. I think she's 29. So the Psalm 84 is written like everybody else's, like all the other Psalms. It's written out of story. Like, you got to understand something about the Psalms, like because they are poetic, but the Psalms weren't written like at a weekend writers conference on how to get a book published. Right? The Psalms are written out of people's experience, people who have been through really challenging times and setbacks, and people who had been plotted against, and people who had, at times, some of them, people had tried to murder them and kill them and launch manipulation and betrayed them and stabbed them in the back, right? It's written out of people who have experienced depression in the lowest points, right? Psalm is written out of life experiences and they carry this really cool tension between anguish and praise, and loss and celebration, and grief and restoration. Like all of that is in the Psalm. So Psalm 84 is just another one of those writings. And I think it gives us a window into the fact that just maybe there's something greater than back. Here's what it says, Psalm 84. Maybe you follow along in your Bible, look on your phone, whatever it is, where you're going to follow along. How lovely is your dwelling place. Man, it's just good. Where you are, God, is good, Lord Almighty. My soul yearns. It even faints for the courts and the presence of the Lord. My heart and my flesh are actually crying out, like yearning for the living God. I mean, come on, God, even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young, a place near your altar in your presence. Lord Almighty, my King and my God, and blessed and content and satisfied and fulfilled and contagious and vibrant are those who do dwell and live in your house. Those are the people that are always praising you regardless of the circumstance. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on this pilgrimage. There's this window, and to look, part of the blessed people, part of people who enjoy God's presence are people who are always moving into God's presence. It's a movement. There's a choice, a pilgrimage we take to keep experiencing God. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. This valley of Baca is this picture of a valley of complete desolation. Nothing. Nothing grows. There's no water. There's nothing that's alive. And the psalmist is like, wait. Like when we walk in with praise, our praise makes things grow where nothing else grows. Our praise makes things grow where nothing's been growing. I mean, think about that in the power of your life for a second. Think about the creative potential of your life. When you praise God, things can grow where it doesn't feel like anything can grow. And that's the Psalms. Like, man, even in the junk, something good can come out. They go from strength to strength. This is constant restoration until each appears before God in Zion. Hear my prayer, Lord God Almighty. Listen to me, God of Jacob. Look on your shield, O God. Look with favor on your anointed. I love the first word of verse 10, better. How many of y'all just wish something could be better in your life? Anybody? How many just wish something could be better? How many of you wish something could be better with the person you're here with today? Right? You just right? You don't do it. But yeah, right? We just wish it could be better. How many of you wish something could be better in our world? You just have something like, I wish that could be better. I like it, just better. But better is one day in your courts and in your presence than 1,000 elsewhere. I'd rather be a doorkeeper. I'd rather do the most meaningless task in your house, God, than dwell in the tents of where everybody thinks they have everything else. For the Lord God's a sun and a shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing is he withholding from those whose walk is blameless and in step with him. Lord Almighty, blessed. There it is again. Blessed is the one who's with you, who's praising you, who trusts you, who leans on you. Let's wander back to that word better for a second. Again, I want things I want to be better. I got some better I'd like to experience. I bet you got some better you'd like to experience. Right? The psalmist paints this picture of like, hey, where things get better is in God's presence. Where things get better is where God is moving. Where things get better, where we get a better perspective, where we get the better of his peace, where we get the better of his joy, where we get the better of his healing, where we get the better of his recovery, where we get the better of his vision and his dream. Well, that's all in his presence with him, like in close proximity with him. And And we might miss that if all we want to do is get back. Because what if God's doing a redemptive work right now, and all we want to do is get back, and so then we miss what he's doing right now? See, here's what the psalmist knows, and I think here's the invitation for us in this season, is to begin to understand that better is greater than back. Better is greater than back. Better with God, better in God's presence, more of God's presence, more with God is greater than going back, is greater than whatever we think is back to normal, is greater than a return to right. Better is greater than back. Look, we're going to talk about this a couple times. I want an end to most of what we're in, right? Just like we all do, right? But I don't want to miss better. I don't want to miss better. I don't want to miss better. I don't want to just escape now to get back, and by escaping, miss what this really creative, redeeming God is doing. Better is greater than back. So if we want more peace, if we want more joy, if we want less fear, if we want less hostility, if we want more healing, if we want more recovery, if we want better rest, if we want better vision, better hope for the future, if we want better marriages and better relationships and better school experiences and better friendships, if we want better is in his presence. Better is with God. But how are we going to ever experience better? I mean, how are we ever really going to experience his presence? Like, let's go all the way back to the beginning, to verse 2, and here the psalmist starts to unpack a little bit how we experience this better. He describes like this longing he has. He says, my soul longs for you. My heart and my flesh, like every fiber of my being, it's just craving more of God. Like I'm just yearning for God. In fact, I'm just tired with how intense my longing is for you. So do you see like what the psalmist isn't craving, isn't fainting for? The psalmist isn't fainting and yearning and longing for the end of whatever he's in. The psalmist isn't yearning for the end of the trouble. The psalmist isn't yearning, in our case, for the end of COVID or the end of hostility or the end of fear or the end. The psalmist is longing for the presence of God. Like the person of God. Like saying, what I first want is God, because I know that with God, I'm going to actually get a better solution. We'll get a better end. We'll get a better redemption of the time. We'll get a better, so I'm just longing for the person of God. See, here's what the psalmist knows from his own experience, and I think what the psalmist is inviting us to know is that if better is greater than back, for us to experience that, we got to begin to understand that who is greater than what? Who's greater than what? Who is greater than what? Who we are with is greater than what we're going to get. The who of God is greater than the answer we want God to give. The who of God and his presence. That God is greater than whatever thing we think it is we want to end or to start. Right? I mean, again, we could get to the end of COVID and miss God, and I'm not sure we'll be any better. We might be more complacent. We might be more frustrated. We might still be confused. We might have more angst, right? But do we want the who or the God? Probably, I don't know, like 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks into this COVID time, I was on the phone with one of my friends. And I was remarkably challenged by this conversation we're having because he says, John, look, we're all praying, get rid of COVID and let COVID go away, because that's what we all want, right? That's still what we all want this season to end, right? Which is why we say things like we want to go back. He said, but what if, John? He said, what if we keep praying this, but we become so consumed on the answer, we become so consumed by did it happen or didn't it happen? What if when it does happen, we were so consumed with the what that we missed who did it? What if we become so consumed with the solution that we miss the God who's trying to get us to the solution? What if we become so consumed with the answer to this thing that we miss the God who's actually doing something good in us right now? And there was this really awkward silence on the phone. Because I'm like, oh no, that's me. That's me. You're not my friend anymore. That's me. Way too close to home. Like, yeah, what if? Listen, what if we plead for the thing that we want, but become so consumed with the thing that we want that we lose track of the God that we think we're pleading to? Look, we've talked about this a lot. I'd rather get God than a solution, because once we got a solution, there's another problem coming. Right? It's not like this is our first challenging season as humans, right? So I was like, I want God. I want God. I want to want God more than I want back and more than I want a solution. I want to want the person of God even more than I want God's solution. I want to want the person and the being and the presence of God more than I want the escape, more than I want the out, more than I want the relief. I want to want God, because it's with God that is better. It's better with God. It's more peaceful. It's more joyful. It's more enduring. It's more strength-giving. It's more envisioning. It's more healing with God than any solution is going to be. I want to want God, not just God's answer. And I want to dare you to want God. I want to dare you in a time where our lives are flooded with what we are supposed to be afraid of, or what we're supposed to believe or not believe, and who we're supposed to agree with and who we're not supposed to agree with, and which side you're supposed to be on, and in a world that is flooded with that, and with ears that are flooded with that. I just want to dare you to want God. I dare us. I dare us to be people who would get to a place where we say, man, my soul longs for God. I want so much to change. But I want God because I think he's got better change. I want God because I don't want to miss a moment. I'm so amazed that God could be redemptive even in this terrible time. So what if our longings for COVID to end, or the election to go well, or things to be peaceful, or other parts of the world what if our prayers for those things were based first in our longing for the God who we're actually hoping intervenes in those things? I want him. I want him. When the next problem comes, I want God. I don't want a solution to an old problem that may or may not apply anymore. But here's the thing, we get in these times, right? And it's kind of tricky because we've been in this long enough now, right? We've been in several months. It feels like several years, right? And it's like, okay, what are we going to do with this thing? We've been in so long that what happens is we started to think about things that we wanted, and we started with prayers that we were praying, and we wonder, where is it all at, and what's moving, and who's really in charge, and how do I know where to go? And there is a lot of fear, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of divisiveness, and what do we do with all that? And it doesn't feel like we can make a change, and somehow it feels like, well, it must not be up to make a change. And pretty quickly in times like this, you can start to feel numb and neutralized. You start to feel just numb to it all. I can't take any more. I can't take any more news or information. I'm just I'm overload. I can't do any more. And we just start to feel numb. And then you even start to feel a little numb spiritually. It's like, well, I think I love Jesus, or I think I still love Jesus, or I did love Jesus, or I was going to love Jesus. But I'm so numb because I'm worn out by all this, and I'm neutralized. I thought I could make a change. I thought I could be a difference. I thought I could be a bright light. I thought I could be a voice of reason. I thought I could be a voice of help. But man, it doesn't feel like the needle's moving, and we can quickly feel neutralized. And when you get numb and neutralized, we usually just stop. We just kind of stop, just kind of ride it out, and want things to go back. And yet, what if we're not? Don't have to be numb and neutralized. What if there's a way to say, look, what's my part in cultivating a heart that is longing and desperate for the person of God? Let me give you a couple of things. And I would encourage you, if you are at all a note taker, just write these down, jot them down on something, or type them into your phone or something. They're not going to sound profound, but they're just things I think multiple times in life we find ourselves coming back to a little bit. Here's the first one. Just pray it. If we want more of God just pray it. Just pray it. You say, pray what? One of the best prayers at times in our life is just, God, would you help me want you? God, would you help me want you? And maybe it's even one step before that. God, would you help me want to want you? God, I'm honestly not even sure I want you. So would you help me want to want you? Probably 25, maybe 30 years ago, I read a book, and that prayer was like the third sentence into the book in the introduction. This prayer, dear God, would you help me want to want you? I don't remember anything else in the book. But I can still see that part of the page and how that just settled into my soul. It's like, yeah, God, I want to be honest enough with you sometimes to say, I like decidedly want you, but I don't really know what and how I'm engaging you and what that looks like. God, would you help me want to want you? And maybe the greatest prayer for some of us in this season, maybe the greatest prayer collectively in this season is, God, just help us want you. Of course we want solutions. Of course we want things to end. Of course we want the hungry to be fed. Of course we want racial reconciliation. Of course we want the end of COVID. Of course we want people to have jobs. Of course we want, right? Of course. But God, would you help me want you in the middle of that? Would you help me want you in it so I don't miss your better, so I don't miss what it is you're doing to redeem what feels like a wasted time? God, would you help me want you? Would you help me want to want you? Right? It's the who thing, right? It's like, who do we really want? I want the person. Remember when you're a little kid, or some of you are like in here and you're really small and you get hurt, like you fall out of the tree, you fall off the bike, or you whatever, right? And you kind of want a Band-Aid. And you never want peroxide, right? But you've got some things you want, or you kind of want a Band-Aid, you maybe want some ice or whatever, but what you first want is you want your mom, right? You want your mom. On good days, you want your dad, okay? Those are rare in those moments, but on good days, you want your dad, right? But you want the person. You want the person. That's us a little bit like, God, I do want all that. God, I want all those things, but God, I want you, and I want to want you. Please, God, don't let us get to the end of this season and me not be more aware of your presence and more in tune with your step and more aware of your greatness and how you can use anything for your good. God, please don't let me get to the end of this and just be back. God, I want to want you. Second thing is just catch it. Just catch it. Pray it and catch it. Hunger for God, longing for God is contagious. It is contagious. Get around people who are hungry for God. Get yourself in a conversation with people who want Jesus, the person of Jesus, right? Who want that. I just wonder what it'd be like if for every hour of conversation we spent on a virus and on masks and on elections and on politics, and I wonder if for every hour of conversation we had about things like that, if we had an hour spent with people who are hungry for God and talked about what God might be up to and how God might invite us into that and how God might be shaping something and how God might be working in ways we can't yet see and how God might be inviting our own souls to be humbled before Him. I just wonder, right? And we live in West Michigan. Most of us will live in West Michigan. And it gets easy in a religious culture like West Michigan to think about, did I read my Bible today? Did I pray? Some people said I even have to journal to get to heaven. Did I get these things right? I didn't do them today. I probably shouldn't tell anybody. Right? And look, all those matter. God communicates to us through the Scriptures. God communicates to us through prayer and conversation with Him. But what if just as important is the amount of time and life-giving interaction we get with people who are hungry for God? This psalm is full of they. They move, they pilgrimage, they find the way, right? Because the picture is that the nation of Israel broken into these expanded family tribes. They're moving together. Hunger is contagious. Get in a relationship, get with a group of people, just push until you find one where you say, man, these people actually have a real genuine hunger for God. I'm in. These people have a real, they just want to be with Jesus. Their hearts are longing for the person of Jesus. Catch it. It is contagious. It's contagious. And the last one, just hear it. Just hear it. Just hear about who God is and hear what it looks like to hunger Him and hear what it looks like to say, oh man, that's why it's better. That's what Jesus does. That's who Jesus is in my life and in all situations. That's who Jesus is and how He works. That's His heartbeat. That's just what makes Him tick. That's what brings him joy and delight. That's what he loves to do. That's who he loves to be. And we just hear it. Now, how do we hear it? We hear it in places like this. Like we hear it through the conversations we're catching. We hear it through the scriptures. We hear it through the Spirit of God in us. We hear it through what we sing. That's why we're really intentional about what we sing. Like we think about the words of what we sing. So periodically, this doesn't happen very often, somebody will say, man, we should sing that song. I'm like, have you listened to that song? Like it doesn't line up with anything that we've learned about the story of Jesus. Like we're very intentional because why? Because what we hear actually is part of what's fueling our longing for God, our amazement for God. What we hear matters. Music is just one of those ways. In fact, this week, if you follow Journey in any capacity, email, social media, whatever, every day this week, we're just going to send out a song. And you'll have heard some of them, or you won't have heard some of them. I don't know. But just songs to say, look, I'm just going to listen and let what I hear fuel my longing for the person of God. Not just the longing to go back, not just an escape, but for God himself. I just want God. We need God to do what feels like a million things. But I don't want the million things if we're not in the presence of God, where the psalmist said, that's where it's better. That's where it's better. And I just want to ask us, do we want the person of God more than we want an end to what we're in? Do we want the person of God more than we want an end to what we're in? Look, I want an end to what we're in. Okay, I do, right? But would we want God more? This morning, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a couple minutes, and the team's going to come, and we're going to do one of the three. We actually kind of do all three in one, but we're just going to we're going to sing about the goodness of God, the amazement of God, the nature of God that draws us to long for him, and just be reminded of that life really does start with him, and wholeness starts with him, and that he really is perfect and matchless and full of glory and purely motivated love and graciousness. That's him, and he really is this way forward. He's the one that when we're in his presence, he can drive out fear. He can actually remove and push back fear. He can actually calm things in our life. He can actually calm hurricanes raging in our minds and in our hearts. That's that God. And so I want to invite you to stand if you're able, and whether you're here or whether you're, again, home, vacation, whatever, I just want to invite us to be people who let's sing and absorb the person of God. And let it be part of how we say today, God, I want you. Yes, there's a million ways we need you to move. Yes, we need an end to some things. But God, I want you. I want you. And for some of us in the next few minutes, the prayer really is, God, would you help me want to want you? And I just want to take it, that's an okay prayer. It's probably one of the most powerful and profound prayers you may ever pray. God, I want to want you. God, I want to want you. And maybe even your hunger in these next couple of minutes will be contagious to other people in the room that maybe you don't even know. But just the longing of your spirit, the cry of your heart being for God, it may just be contagious. People may catch it from you. Lord Jesus, we just want you. I don't even think there's a perfect way to you in these moments. We just want to tell you it's our desire. We want you, and we want to want you. Man, there are so many broken things. We don't want to just return to return. And God, there was brokenness 6 months ago that if we just go back, we're just going to go back to some of that. God, what we want is you. We want you. So God, even these moments, we're inviting you to hear our prayer, to stir that longing, to to stir our desire, our craving for you. God, and so maybe we'll kneel before you just as a sign. Say, God, here, I just let my body lead my heart. I just want you. Maybe we'll sing like we never have before about who you are and your goodness, knowing that even in our singing, you're stirring that longing. Maybe we'll just listen and we'll just absorb the truth about who you are, and it's in that your Spirit will kind of sweep across our soul. We'll say, yes, I want God. In all of it, God, just you kind of have your way in us, I pray. In Jesus' name.